Recording in progress.
I didn't know, I didn't like even in person, but it's.
All right, as we begin the June Lebanon Resiliency Board meeting, I guess it certainly looks like we have a quorum here tonight, so I'll pass on that. If Greg, I guess, I don't know who takes attendance or things like that, but because we always mark in the minutes who's here, who isn't. Okay. But moving on with that, well, I guess roll call. So you have the roll? Okay, well, for the record, I'll just make it easy. Okay. John Rumbold's here, Linda Topoleski, Chet Wade, Lynn Lindley, Mr. Tropen, I'm sorry, Nicias.
Cartman.
Right, and Greg, and Jeff Ziegler is our commissioner liaison. Thank you.
And Siebken.
Nancy, sorry, from above. So now we have the meeting minutes. Is there any discussion of the meeting minutes that were passed out? If not, will someone make a motion to approve the minutes? All right, I'll second. All right, all those in favor, any comments? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? None, all right, and I guess the introductions, we are to please welcome Ms. Linda Topoleski, so we will have.
Thanks.
But please tell the board about yourself.
Okay, so I am a communications consultant, specializing in technical areas and economic development. For the past 8 years, though, I've been working at the Allegheny Conference with economic development and business attraction, business retention, and talent attraction and retention. So that's where kind of my more recent expertise lies. So happy to be here, happy to be part of this. And I understand that Mike Gallo is whose shoes I'm filling, and he used to coach my son in soccer. So I was glad to see that he was involved. Happy to be here.
Great.
John, just to make a point, there is a attendee for citizens comment. I don't know if they're wanting to make a comment at all, but I just want to make that known.
Ms. Brown, would you like to make a comment, or you can hold off?
She can, yeah, if she wants to raise her hand to make a comment, I can allow her to talk.
All right, seeing none, we'll go to the bulk of the meeting. Commission liaison report.
Trying to think what all we have covered that is most relevant to this board. I saw in the minutes the South Garage was a point of discussion. So, you know, right now we're having some feasibility studies done to determine what can happen there. Few different moving parts, but you know, realize that can be a pretty important site for uptown the municipality. Again, nothing comes to mind, right, that's been in front of us the last 2 meetings that I find that I can think that's relevant. But what I would like to say is that you know what I'm really want to figure out, what I want to work on, both in here and with as a commissioner, is the built environment. You know, I'm a big believer that the built environment has a huge impact on all of our lives, and how, you know, our mental health, our physical health, our social health, our financial health. And I think that, you know, that's something that we have a lot of ability to control, you know, whether it's incentivize or disincentivize. I think we can, I see where Mount Lebanon can do a lot better in terms of our built environment and be more attractive, be more sustainable, be more walkable, be more bike friendly, like all those things that, you know, we kind of talk it up, but I don't know that we have completely delivered on the promise of being this incredibly walkable community. And what I see through my work is a you know, community revitalization and urban planning consultant, is that when you get the built environment right, really so many other things fall into place. You know, that's your best economic development strategy. Who doesn't want to live in a community that's beautiful, that's walkable, that's fun, that's social, simultaneous? I mean, it just does all these incredible things. And so we I'm trying to figure out how we can do better, because I think that there's multiple parts to that. One, you know, you do have to incentivize it. Two, you have to be willing to get punitive, because it comes down to a standard. You know, in essence, if a standard is lowered, everything gets worse, and I think that we're really kind of, I'm trying to figure out the tools to uphold the standard. You know, in the conversation last night at commission, it's, you know, what I come to find is like, oh, it's really hard to fine anybody for properties that are in violation. It turns out that we can't do anything until it goes to the magistrate. So it's a really convoluted process. And it's like, well, it's really hard to uphold a standard when the tools to enforce aren't really there, or they're ineffective, but they take too long. So, you know, that's part of it, is figuring out how we do that. Two, I think that, you know, what I've kind of realized too recently, it's like, in a lot of these communities I work in, I used to think that, oh, is there, you know, are these organizations malevolent, or are they actively trying to keep good things from happening, of course not. And what dawned on me is there's a lot of minutia. You know, there's old policies in place, there's processes in place. People are used to doing things a certain way that keeps us from changing. I mean, I know that we're all pretty aware that, like, it's really hard to get anything done these days. You know, there's so much infrastructure or sort of minutia in place that I know that this isn't necessarily what my liaison report was supposed to be, but I still think, but I think it matters. And what I find is that, like, we can't seem to get anything done. You know, in the face of urban renewal and all those mistakes of the 70s and 80s, we put in a lot of structure in place to keep anything from happening. And now we're stuck with, you know, the 70s and 80s style. Like, a good example is we do, every year there's a report on the condition of the roads, and then when the roads hit a certain condition, you know, it triggers it basically that's when we start talking about spending money to replace them. And I asked the question, well, do we do that with sidewalks? Like, no, like, we don't. And so that's the type of stuff that's all sort of been in place that keeps us continuing to be more car friendly and less, you know, bike pedestrian friendly. So that's really what I want to accomplish during my term, and work with this board to try to figure out. I'm, you know, much more on the economic development, you know, built environment side than I am on the resiliency side and kind of the environmental side. But I also understand that when you have a really healthy and good built environment, you're going to be more environmentally friendly. You're going to accomplish a lot of other things. Like, great cities are good in all those ways, and so the better we can do. So that's what I kind of my manifesto, I guess. So yeah, like I said, I want to keep working with this entity to try to bring policies to the commission that help us get towards more of those issues.
Thank you. Any questions for the commissioner? So it was a pretty, what would it say, full-throated report, so.
I do have a question on the
Yes.
feasibility studies for the south garage. Is there a target date when they'll be completed?
I think we are, I believe, July, August, so I don't think it's that. Yeah, we met with a bunch of different real estate professionals in May, and we had a great forum to ask a lot of questions and try to better understand, you know, what all is possible. And there are parts of that, I mean, let's see, how can I say this, the city solicitor doesn't, it could be a bigger project depending, but, you know, I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
A lot of factors in a project like that, what gets as an addition or added on, or so to say, add alternate.
Yes.
What do you see our role, this board's role? I mean, there are a lot of people who have thoughts and ideas, and you have professionals weighing in. What does the commission see as this board's role in the process?
Sure, you know, helping to generate policy. I mean, bring, like, okay, how do we more effectively both process and policy? I guess if we see processes that are keeping us from, you know, growing more sustainable and having a better built environment, and then, you know, we can identify those and address those. But I also think policy, you know, if again, there's a lot of policy, I'm sure that's been adopted in the past that's no longer effective, that we can do away with and adopt new policy that will get us there. So I kind of see this as, you're all more informed. good example, like last night, the five of us commissioners are having a discussion here on pool filtration, and it's like, this is like, none of the five of us are an expert in pool filtration, but that's where we kind of ended up, and it's like, that's silly. What I think we all want is to have experts in these fields, help guide better policy and process so that we can do better in every facet. So that's, that's how I see the role.
And that's helpful, but I was actually thinking more specifically about the South Garage, which
Oh,
is,
wow.
is the number one priority of the board based on our last meeting.
Mhm.
You know, there are going to be a lot of people with opinions,
Yeah.
you know, but where do we fit in? How do we help that process? That was my question, given you have already consultants in, you have other discussions, what can we do?
I think, an additional voice of what that should be, what that should look like. Unfortunately, I don't think that because we're probably not able yet to, like, the whole scope of it is not yet determined, because of other moving parts and parts that are can't be discussed publicly yet, if you will. So it's kind of it's tricky because I don't know that there can be a real discussion about what that project looks like just yet, unfortunately. But it's when the time comes, I think it would be very helpful. You know, what I don't want to do ever is I see where a lot of elected officials are in the habit of, the people that show up to the meetings and shout, get their way. I don't have any interest in letting, a few people get their way because they showed up to the meeting to cause problems or whatever, when there's 35,000 other people in the community that didn't speak up, that aren't bothered by something. So I guess I see this entity as being very helpful when it comes to the South Garage project or anything else to, provide, here's what we think would be best, here's what we think the community would like. And also to, show up to the meetings at times and say, because it can be hard. I can see where, it can be intimidating when you have a room full of people all angry, but I don't think that they represent everybody. What they usually represent is we don't want change, but we need change. And so I think this is a great entity for that when it comes to the South Garage, when it comes to other sites and kind of the whole gamut.
Anna's raised her hand, so.
Thank you. I actually, let me see if I can lower. I also did want to, when I saw the list of priorities, I was actually sort of surprised by the priorities as well, having South Garage at the top, because that's a process that goes through feasibility studies. There'll be a consultant who's hired. And so that's actually the sort of the day job associated with the office and with Eric and his work. And I just want to make sure, and because I agree with you, it seems like there could be components of that we help to inform. There aren't a lot of policies right now that I believe need to be updated because we just did the complete streets policy. We've just done a couple of these other policies. So I just want to, I'm asking the same question, but I think it's really important because if that's going to be the top priority, I guess we just need to understand kind of how it, like what role we can play because we're not all professional consultants in this area, and there will be people hired to do that. So is that to say that we would have any decision-making ability? Like, here are 3 options. Which one do you think people might like best? Or won't there be a community process? And how could we inform that?
Right. I do think, I'm sure there will be a community process. And I think that it would be, probably recommendations on how to run that process simultaneously, having, again, it's an informed opinion towards what that should be that sort of represents the community as well. So again, it doesn't become just kind of here's what NIMBY, the NIMBY reaction, but instead here's what would I think it's your sort of a more professional community opinion that would help guide what gets done.
Okay, that sounds great. And maybe when Eric gets back, because it's been put at the top of the list, he could tell us more about some of the ways that we can get involved with this part too.
Yes, and I should say, like, still pretty new on the job, so I've got to figure out kind of how these things work as well. This will be my first, project like this to go through. So
Yeah, it's a big undertaking for the office. It's just, I completely concur on the idea of how can we help support it in a way that will be meaningful for this group when there are those other, 16 additional priorities as well.
Then, right, and it'll be really important. I mean, it'll be a really big help to have this entity pulling in, helping inform that. And again, kind of, and being able to stand up and say at a meeting, this is what the community wants. That's super helpful.
If I may ask a question, from your background, how long have you lived in Pennsylvania? And I'm not trying to.
8 years.
8 years, okay. Yeah, we kind of have foreign ways here in the state, when you were describing some of the issues you had with, what it takes done to do citations and things like that.
Yeah, sadly, I'm learning that.
Yeah,
it's-
that's, and again, in maybe trying to address some of your questions, I'm trying to keep that in the back of my mind, that sometimes when we come here, it's like, I think when we've been living in Mount Lebanon and for a while, or Western Pennsylvania or the state, we sometimes think, okay, this is the way, the world it is or should be. And as you kind of, move on, I hate to say, move more and more into like what Pennsylvania does in general, it's a little bit odd. So, okay, again, not trying to be.
Oh, I don't
I'm not trying to be
say that,
but it's like, okay, this is.
Yeah, I was sort of shocked I never work in the state, I work everywhere else, and I was kind of shocked to learn that the ability to cite property code offenders is, it's hard, it's minimal. I mean, there's some properties right now that are absolute squalor that, like you look at it and say, of course we should be doing something about that, and to find out we can't. To me, it's disappointing, and especially, the state general assembly just put out a report on vacant and blighted property and what a curse it is on the state. So like, maybe it's a good time then that we need to go to the state and see like, how can that process be changed? What do we do to make this simpler? It's like, it's like, imagine that the police couldn't, find any or write tickets. Like, it would be, that makes it pretty hard to do your job, and like, we need both tools to try to get what we want, to have a standard, to incentivize and to be punitive. That's how you raise the standard. That's how we kind of cultivate the type of behavior that we want. And we're really only, it seems like we are dependent just on one and can't use the other, and that needs to be, that's what I want to figure out.
All in on the subject, I think, like with Dan Miller being in the community and being, just literally down the street from us. You have the opportunity to meet him. I mean, I think he's tuned into a lot of these things and is, I think, sympathetic, with what we want to do on things.
So, yeah, that struck me as well. I think it is definitely a conversation with Dan and folks at the state to see, can we figure out, like, what do other states have to do, or what do other states do to allow, the municipality to be more swift? I mean, there's a property on Atlanta Street that, there's rats, there's trash piled up to the rooftop, and it's like, and it's, to be blunt, like, it really sucks to tell the neighbors, like, sorry, that's insufficient, and so, there has to be a better way to manage.
Sort of one thing I wanted to like bring all of it together that I thought of, sort of to Anna's point. I remember that Eric had said in his email that these priorities that we sort of isolated last time aren't obviously the only things that we can work on. And he said that we can move things, up and down the list as we see fit for discussion, all that sort of stuff. One of the things that I was thinking about is maybe in part of our discussion today, even briefly, if we go back through those 5, we think, which are the ones that we can do the most actionable items right now? Like, if we were to put them in a priority based off of, what can we actively start discussing? Because if we're waiting on things like for South Garage, like feasibility studies, even though it is a big priority for the community and how does it look in the future, how is it used in the future, we can't necessarily discuss ideas right now. Do you know what I mean? Like, the number of actionable items for each of these priorities is going to vary. And that priority can continue to change like each month as we get more information from these studies, the different meetings and everything like that. I don't know if anybody's up for maybe discussing like which things we think are actionable or not, or if we want to save that for another meeting perhaps.
Maybe if I say that a lot with Eric, maybe because
Yeah.
there's certain things, when you look at it, the South Garage is a big, giant thing. And, for some of the other ones, again, when they talk about when you're updating the zoning and subdivision ordinances, that's a process. And, but I think that once we do, we can figure out where we want to go with that. I think that with that, we were talking about the continued discussion of comp plan rankings and preliminary discussion on subcommittee development. Greg, did you have any? Last time I think we did an ordering and what we wanted to do, and we had kind of a vote on that. I mean, for tonight's meeting, what was the?
Yeah, so pretty much, I think just what Grace mentioned in Eric's email, kind of discussing where we want to continue moving our efforts. I think it was Krill actually mentioned it was that, what was it, each topic could be synergized or something, I can't remember the word you used. It was something like that where they can become more active as time comes on. As like the zoning and saldo update, you know, that may be a top priority, but we don't see that taking place for another year and a half possibly, maybe longer, maybe shorter. But then again, we just awarded at the first meeting in June. That's, I'm pretty sure when we awarded WTW Architects for the South Garage, so that's happening currently. So it really can alter where we want to move to, but then again, it's really up to the board where we want to put our efforts, because I know with the Activate Uptown process that's going on right now, I know we didn't really put the Parsway at the top of the list, but that's something it's going on, you know, right now as we speak. So it can kind of be, again, I want to leave it up to the board. I don't want to sit there and say, this is what we have to do based on what Eric and I have spoken about, but it's really what the board wants to work on. Because I know there's many different things. I knew stormwater was one of the topics that was high on the list. That's active. I mean, we do stormwater every day, all throughout the year. I mean, storm coming tonight possibly, that's a stormwater issue right there. So it just really, it's up to the board what we want to put our efforts on. And then the only kind of disclaimer I want to mention is, I think it's, if we formulate subcommittees, I think it's three members to a subcommittee, because John, since you're the president of the board, you're kind of a de facto member of each. So it's 3 members, and then including John, so we can't have 5 because that's a quorum. So it's 3 people if you want to participate, and then plus John. But then outside of the board, you can have you know, associate members kind of give their expertise. If you know somebody who's an expert on some, you know, stormwater issue or something like that, for an example. But that's kind of my only disclaimer. But again, it's really up to the discourse of the board, whatever people feel like should be put forth. So.
Hannah has her hand.
Yes. Anna?
Trying to unmute. So I'd actually like to advocate that we not focus on Parsway. Parsway is actually something that we evaluated a couple of years ago. There was all sorts of planning documents for it. There was all sorts of effort put behind it. And I know that it's a hot priority for Eric, but it's something that the office should be working on, which has to be separate. So if we were working on the South Garage and Parsway, we would be duplicating what's happening in the daytime at the office. And this committee could actually focus on other things. So I just want to put in a strong suggestion that we actually focus on other things that aren't being handled. So a lot of times with a committee like this, it's like, okay, so here are the top 5 priorities, and we're working on 3 and 4 and 6, one that we would never get to. But I think that I just want to make sure that we're thinking through what we're focusing on, because there's a lot of content in that chapter, and I just want to make sure we're thinking about it more broadly.
Should we look at our top 5 priorities and see where we can add value in the next 3 to 6 months?
I agree. That's what thinking about, like, where can we, you know, actually put our time right now, and yeah, that's our stuff.
Well, so we have the ones in front of us on here. And again, I'll read them off, but we really have the top 6. I think some have the minutes or involved in front of them. But number 1 is redevelop South Garage. Second is continue to invest in stormwater management solutions, prioritizing green infrastructure for its ecological, environmental, and aesthetic advantages. 3 was the zoning and saldo development. 4, encourage a transition to carbon neutrality. And 5, revise ordinances to address issues related to site ecology and climate action. And this was kind of, 5 was tied, you know, and strengthen the Castle Shannon commercial district. So we have plenty of there on there, but looking at, and we have to start somewhere. So we can start with number 2, because that was down on the list.
Yeah.
And we're talking about continue to invest in stormwater management solutions, prioritizing green infrastructure for its ecological, environmental, and aesthetic advantages. I mean, for something like that, how can we make an impact without, as Anna's saying, repeating someone's day job? And this is something that it's not really, it's very practical. We don't want to, luckily we haven't had too many storms this summer, but you drive down Cedar Boulevard and you could be in, in an event there. We've also spent a tremendous amount of money over the years trying to fix up really stormwater. Again, I'm on the fifth ward, so I see it, I don't see things every place else. But again, we've spent a good bit of money trying to address these things, and we still may, but we don't, we just can't build huge detention ponds all over the place to take care of it either. So in investing in the management solutions and the green infrastructure, does anybody have any?
One of the things that first, sorry if this gets too specific, because not me, but the first thing is, I mean, I haven't been in Mount Lebanon long enough. Some of you have been here for much longer, but I'm sure there is some way that people have listed before, like what are the choke points, like where are the primary places the issues are happening. And if we think about stormwater, I think maybe Greg had mentioned when we were last meeting, we were talking about this as a priority, everything goes downhill. So the higher up you start to address the problem, the better it's going to be for people at the bottom of it, basically. So sort of thinking about literal top-down solutions, and then where are the problem issues? And maybe what's been tried before and hasn't worked. Like you said, if we don't have, space to have retention ponds at all, then that's not an option. If they pursue another avenue, like, fixing drains or adding more drain lines, something like that, and that's not enough, is there another creative solution?
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead. I was gonna say, I was thinking about this particular topic and thinking like there are big infrastructure projects that are out of our purview, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars kind of problem. I think about my own property, and I have a detached garage that's at the back of my property, and son of a gun, the stormwater doesn't drain right down to the street. 95 years ago, they managed to hook that garage all the way in the back, all the way to the street. So we talk about incentivizing, would it make sense, to create incentives? And I'm not promoting my own property, I wouldn't do this, but, would, if somebody else in my situation, say, incentivized to say, hey, take that drain, figure out a way to take it into my yard, into an area that would start to retain some of that water, instead of immediately sending it into the street, into the storm sewer, and down the street, down the stream. Other kinds of things like that would be, the small ball. Sometimes people talk little bits of things that done by lots of people might have larger impact. Could we, as a group, start to think about those and start to encourage that kind of activity, that kind of incentivism, that would make a difference ultimately in stormwater? That wouldn't be a huge infrastructure project.
So have we, the municipality was part of the Three Rivers wet weather demonstration projects that were done as for the consent decree for Alcoasand for stormwater management. We're not using any of those, like bioswales and disconnecting the downspouts and any of that when you sell the house. We're not doing any of that in Mount Lebanon right now?
I guess we don't know.
I'm
not sure.
You sort of bring up a good point, Linda, because I was thinking we need to probably reach out to like those sort of partnerships like Alcoasand and other people like that. I'm sure we already have connections with them to figure out A, solutions, but B, if we would do something like, an incentive for homeowners and stuff like that to adjust their drainage and gutters, is there something where they can get a rebate or it's already provided for? There's so many, I don't know if you want to call it nonprofit organizations. There's so many Pennsylvania organizations that do things, whether it's for solar or for stormwater, whatever it is, that we just have to connect the dots between the resources and the problem, I think is really what our role should be.
Yeah, and I really think Three Rivers wet weather was developed for this entire purpose 10 years ago. And then did demonstration projects with like rain barrels and bioswales and all of that. It only takes 1/10 of an inch of rain for, Turtle Creek to flood out. And even if we're not Turtle Creek getting flooded, we're contributing to it by being upstream. And so just as part of a responsible ecosystem, I find it hard to believe that Mount Lebanon has not been tied into this already. There's so much that's been learned about the topography here and the solutions that work that Greg, I'm sure Eric knows about this. Like we shouldn't be starting from scratch.
Yeah, you shouldn't be doing it, but it's one portion of it, and there's another portion of this number too, which is prioritizing green infrastructure. Well, I'm just saying prioritizing green infrastructure. That's maybe more of a micro level that we don't necessarily have to be dependent upon Three Rivers wet weather on that. I think as far as showing that where we are and what the integration is with Three Rivers wet weather and consent decrees and what the municipality's plans are, that either, Greg, that for the next meeting now, will Eric be at the July meeting? Okay.
We can have, you can ask questions, you know, he's just not at the meetings, he's available pretty much all the time, before, I shouldn't say all the time, I don't want to speak for him, but during office hours, in between the meetings, so feel free to email us questions if you have any. He can most certainly, we can get back to you on that.
Yeah, well, no, but I think would be, you know, for, as far as this committee goes, is that if, and I'm throwing this out there, let me know what you think. And having someone who is either from Gateway or someone, you know, someone at the municipality who can say, in dealing with this, this is where we are. Or this is where we're planning, because right now it's like saying, yeah, we don't know what we don't know. And it may be best if for the next meeting, I'm not asking to have an engineer present, but at least someone who could explain on this topic, if we can make that an action item. Anna, do you agree? Or that they can explain where we are in this area?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing that you have to do with any sort of endeavor like this is have a baseline and understand what we've currently done. So in the plan, it talks about what we'd like to do, what the future is, but we don't actually know what we've done, for example, on stormwater to date. So in the Vibrant Uptown project, for example, there were new beds that were put in to capture stormwater. However, the curb cuts that are required to have those be really effective were not necessarily included. So it's like, we actually need to understand some of the details around what we've done. Like I've every time I walk past those curbs, I think to myself, why don't we have the curb cuts so that water flows into those? Maybe there was a reason, but I think that having that baseline of understanding around what we've done with stormwater, someone needs to have the history and say, okay, 10 years ago, we worked with Three Rivers and this is what we got from that, or they did a study. I know that we've had consultants come in and do work very, very specifically on like stormwater management, particularly as we were planning for the Vibrant Uptown project. And so maybe this committee could get a briefing. I don't know whether it's Eric or if it's Gateway, but somebody's got to have that history that can help us figure out what we've already tried. Because the last thing we want to do is actually make recommendations and then have them say, oh, we did that. That's so 3 years ago.
Yeah, I don't think it'd be any issue to get somebody from Gateway.
I was even thinking our public works director too, he has 30+ years of institutional knowledge of public works, so it's something I can ask them about.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can
So,
go.
but Rudy's never had the focus on stormwater necessarily. So I would want to make sure it's someone who actually has it as a focus.
Oh, absolutely.
Because that's just, it's not something that has been a focus of his in terms of like sustainable measures that we've done or interventions that we've done associated with stormwater management.
Okay.
It also sounds like a potential subcommittee.
It does, but maybe before we hit the subcommittee, that at least that we all have a
The
baseline
context.
of
Yeah.
where we are, because there may be some things where and this could be maybe something after, in doing that, is to say, all right, this is what we, some people may have more of an interest after the discussion.
Mhm.
Some people may find less of an interest, or really, you're also judging, everybody can't be on every subcommittee.
Yes.
And so it's, prioritizing our own individual efforts, but again, to even start out with that, we would, it would be great if someone with
Yeah.
Gateway would be present.
Absolutely.
It sounds like there's an opportunity here for this kind of a committee, this kind of
Yeah.
board to actually do something effective.
Exactly. So, that's great. Going down, I would say the list, not only mechanical, but we have to start somewhere and end up somewhere else. Again, the Saldo and zoning, we discussed that. That's very kind of a more formal process, and that's going to come a bit from the top down. Have they retained, is the consultant been retained to update the zoning?
No, that's, like I said, it could be a year out. I know in the comp plan, I was actually reading. I lost it, but I was reading the comp plan that we were possibly thinking about doing it in 2026, possibly 2025. Again, that's
We finished,
2025.
we finished the
Yeah.
comp, oh, we finished the comp plan last year?
Comp plan was finished last year and we approved it in January. And, you know, we wanted to do zoning right away. Staff said they basically could not do it this year, so 2025.
All right, well, that makes temporal sense.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Sorry, I apologize. So when we had our first meeting, and I missed our second meeting, I'm so sorry about that. In our first meeting, we floated an idea of having someone give an overview of all of the different sections. Did that ever happen? Because I think what we were trying to do with that process was actually have the municipal staff and the engineers tell us, you know, where, like, what is the status of each of those things? This one's going to happen in 28. This one's, you know, because they have a priority that they've worked out. It starts with the South Garage. It might go to Parsway next. But like, I think that if we actually heard about all of them in an overview, that we would be able to sort of really quickly see places where we could insert. So did they do I mean, we talked about doing an overview, like having everybody come in and have read a chapter or whatever, and then go through them kind of a top to bottom overview. Did that happen or?
We did talk about that, or I was there for the first meeting as well, but what we did the second meeting is we came in as a group and we were prepared. We had looked at the 18 different unique points.
Right.
And we were to walk away with the top 5 or 6 as our priority list. We were given 3 votes or 5 votes, I think. We were given 5 votes each. And we went around as a team and cast a vote.
Okay.
And based on how many votes each of the 18 received, that's how we ended up with the final priority list, understanding that it was final but temporary.
Yeah, it's.
Final but flexible.
Right. It was like a working list.
It was,
Um,
yes.
So, but do we get to receive like a more clarity around what's happening? I mean, it's very much like what you were just saying, like, oh, that's not happening for a couple of years. Like, which
That's-
ones are happening now?
That's what we're kind of doing right now, I would think, is talking through and kind of understanding what we want to put our efforts towards. And then, like we just mentioned with stormwater, we discussed that. The request was, could we possibly have a gateway representative or someone from staff to talk?
Right,
about
but has anyone given us an overview that's outside of the document of all 17 of the areas?
Of like what has been, like, it would be helpful, I think, for us to know, are there any sort of efforts, like, is there a feasibility study going on? Is there yada, 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 whatever it is? And some of them might not have any work being done on them, but just to know, like, hey, here are the steps that the office is doing. So here's what you could do. That's what I think we're sort of asking.
Okay, so if we did that, we would need someone to go through, almost like giving the state of the union, so to speak, and to go through the ones and say, and that I think is gonna have to be on a special meeting, especially.
Well, it could be Eric, who's he's familiar with all of them and knows the status.
Eric had extended an offer to all of us to meet with him separately, just to better understand what was what. So I did that with him maybe 10 days ago. We met at the coffee shop and he has a prepared list here where he sort of broke it down a little bit differently. His high level points are local ecology is number 1, sustainable practices is number 2, land use plus development is number 3, and business district is number 4. Not all points have dates, but some do. And I don't need to speak for him, but I think he would be and is prepared to kind of go through it. I will tell you just based on what I have in front of me, which I feel like you've already said, but the places that have real designations for 2024 are under the business district. So you've got placemaking because of Activate Uptown, and you've got Parsway listed there as well. And then for 2025, the places that he has called out are revise the ordinances to address ecology and climate action, and also the undertake and update the zoning and subdivision and land use ordinances with a whole lot of due diligence that needs to be done in the meantime. So those are the only things right now that had any kind of dates, but just as a obvious reminder, it's already almost July 1st of 2024, so.
Well, I mean, this, yep, so then I'm thinking along these grounds, if we're going back now to the, let's say, the State of the Union, so to speak. And if, and since Eric's going to be gone, next month as well, that doesn't, that does, well, I don't know if he could go in by Zoom, or the alternative would be, don't want to have maybe another public meeting on it, but if he did a briefing on that, I think there's always a fine line between public meetings where there's deliberation and having informational meetings which are not subject to the Sunshine Act. If we go in and Eric gives a State of the Union and says, out of these 12 or so items, this is what's going on. I think that's, or the alternative is that if there's any type of, hey, we should maybe do this, we should maybe do that. I would think that Eric may have to meet maybe, Lynn should be part of it, though you've had your meeting
Sure,
with them,
yes.
is that maybe meet, set up three dates or times where Eric can go through things so that if anybody has any questions or says, well, this is what the idea is, why don't we do that? Then we're not falling into deliberation.
Yeah, I was gonna suggest something similar, or if that doesn't work for people, even like one of us could, take notes at a meeting like that to, get the information down, so all of us to make sure we're all on the same table at our July meeting if he's not able to do Zoom or something like that.
Could you just give us a written summary?
I was just gonna
That
say
too,
that
yeah.
we could most certainly provide a written summary on an active project, because there's some things as well that I'm working on that doesn't necessarily pertain to economic development, like the carbon neutrality. We've talked with the commission a couple times about vehicle infrastructure, electric vehicle charging stations, and then some possibilities of fleet electrification. So we're working on some things right there. But I think it could be a worthwhile kind of document just to say, here's where we are as of July of 2024, and that may help kind of move forward with some of these priorities that we have listed down. So
Yeah.
I think it would be really helpful for us to have like that executive briefing of beyond what's on the page that was the general document, so that we understand the specifics. Because really, stormwater is great and we could work on that. If that's not what everyone else is going to be thinking about or focused on until 2029, then it's like maybe not what we should be focusing on. Because I think we want to focus on the most important things that are going to have traction, not only with the commissioners, but with the staff, in a way that's supportive and not duplicative.
When we were doing our voting, everyone was pretty consistent about the kind of things they were voting on. I mean, if we take out the land use and development, so we've already said that's probably not something that's gonna end up being high on our list. We're down to the local ecology, sustainable practices, and business districts. If we've got 3 people in a subcommittee, that's 9. I mean, if we can get to the point where, 3 people want the local ecology, 3 people want sustainable practices, 3 people want business districts, we can get into our subcommittees and from there have smaller groups of people deciding what to prioritize in that. Instead of 9 people trying to decide on 18 different things, you have 3 people trying to decide on 4 or 5 different things. If that
Yeah,
works.
no, I agree. I feel like taking at least like small steps and moving forward will at least get us somewhere, so we aren't all talking in circles all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think key question for the briefing is where can this group add value for the next 3 to 6 months? Because like we talked like this, we like that, but where can we add value now? So not just what's happening, but where are we going to be helpful?
So we're talking about, we're planning an executive summary for Eric to prepare on that. And then take that whenever it's published for the July meeting to figure out where we want to go with that. Am I getting that correct?
Question on the business districts. I sit on the board for the partnership. And even though most of the focus there is on Uptown, what would we see as the role here? Other than any practices or best practices that we establish as a group or the municipalities establishing, we would want the business districts to adhere to, i.e. the curbs and all of that. Because I understand they had to be dug up twice to comply and they still weren't right. So that would be an issue for this group, but the vibrancy of uptown may not be an issue for this group, but better served by the partnership. Like when I see Castle Shannon Business District, where would we connect with that the partnership might not?
Well, I'm thinking with a partnership. I think part of it with Castle Shannon and maybe the emphasis that I was seeing is that for Uptown, we were, there's a tendency maybe once in a while for us to think that the only business district is Uptown.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, into Castle Shannon is the, is the side note and it's not thought of too highly. And I think what the idea was, how that got more prioritized is the fact that Beverly Road seems to be doing fine. I understand there's going to be some reshuffling of the businesses in that area, in the IO area. Uptown has in the partnership, and we've devoted a lot to Uptown. What are we going to do about Castle Shannon? And so I think even in that regard, for people who have experience with partnership or other areas, is that do we want to have certain, standards? What do the business people think in that area? What is the Castle Shannon commercial district? Can't go into Castle Shannon, but I mean, what are our powers there? But I think that part of it is that with the Castle Shannon issue was looking at what have we done Uptown that we might be able to do the same thing in Castle Shannon.
Well, and it may be, as you were suggesting, Jeff, about this not being such a bike-friendly community, and Beverly Road in particular, parking is even more of an issue. And in one of our previous partnership meetings, we were talking about how so much of that business comes from local residents who can walk, but how much more could come if people could get there by bike and not rely on parking. Whereas Uptown, a good deal of the business that comes into merchants here, they don't live here. And so parking is an issue because they're getting here by car. They're not likely to bike here, but maybe some of these same principles you're talking about in terms of a bike-friendly community or some other design elements relating to the business, we could have joint preparing with the partnership.
Well, what would the role of this group be, for example, when you sort of make these decisions about being bike friendly? Well, what are the impediments? Well, what do we know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is our role research? I mean, I'm a believer in having, good data to work from, and we can guess why people don't bike to X, Y, Z. Is it because of the hills, because of the traffic, because they don't know the bike, because they have disabilities? What is it that keeps them, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody else does, but.
That's interesting. I mean, certainly the research helps. I think, too often anytime you start to talk about these things, that might take away someone's car lane, there's this, reactionary, like you're gonna ruin everything. And I think having the data, there's plenty of data out there that shows actually it's really good for business. It's really good for property values. These things are beneficial. So having that is helpful. And I don't mean to get specifics and we're more speaking in generalities, but I certainly think it would be, one of the biggest constraints to get it fostering more biking in Mount Lebanon, the South Hills, it's hard. It's not, regular bikes is impractical, but e-bikes, I think would, an e-bike rebate or something that we could come up with, a grant for that. I think that, to see more people, if there were 200, 500 more e-bikes in the neighborhood, boy, I think that would start to make a difference.
Well, and I don't want to push traffic on people's roads, but for example, on Beverly, because it is also a commuter route, all of a sudden shutting off traffic on Beverly probably wouldn't work out well. So do you create and promote alternate routes for bikers that don't take you on Beverly, which, you're a little dangerous, but do you start to think more broadly? A lot of what I think groups like this can do can really be in the promoting, the communicating, and incentivizing people mentally and emotionally to do the things that we think are helpful and provide them ideas. And I'll give you a really, again, personal example. I had to pick my daughter up at the airport, and I'm thinking, where do I park? I had to go search and figure out, oh, by the way, they'll give you an hour free parking in the extended line. You can wait till somebody comes. Nobody promoted that. I'm driving this circle. I'm burning gas, trying not to get, because the county police are telling me don't stop here. And I had to find it out. And then when I did, I said, great, I can sit here, I can shut the engine off, I can wait for her, and we're good. I think it's that same kind of thing we can do, is to find solutions people don't know exist. And say, and raise up that solution, and say, hey, we can do these things together. Without spending $25 million or $100 million we don't have.
Yeah.
So a quick comment. So there is a mobility board, just like this one. And I think that they are working to tackle some of the mobility and transportation related issues, which includes the bike infrastructure we desperately need. So I'm sorry to be the bearer of that news.
I know and we've talked, I think at the meeting, my first meeting, which was the second one, we talked about that idea. We probably also need to have a connection with, these boards all overlap, especially this board overlaps with everyone.
Absolutely. And I think they have a way of us having like a liaison to hear what's happening at the others. But I do know that specifically transportation related things are happening in that mobility committee. Although it has a huge impact on resiliency and our ability to actually lower our carbon footprint.
Right.
Definitely interconnected.
One last thing, sorry. I know we're dragging on. So thinking about all of our discussion, little highways and byways we've been taking here, I feel like as we're trying to wrestle among ourselves, and also we want to ask Eric, where can we practically add value? What is the purpose of this board? We're going to get the executive report sort of thing. I feel like it's helpful to sort of categorize the type of help we can give. So there's sort of the free category in terms of information. We can inform people. There are the practical now. So what are things that we can get done with the resources we have? And then there are long-term investments. What are things that we need to bring up to the commission, highlight it, say this is super important. It might require a lot of time, might require a lot of money, resource investment sort of thing. But if we think of information, the practical things we could do now, the long-term investment is like the three types of things for each of these 18 points that we end up trying to get through, however many we can get through on this board. Really thinking, what can be done in each of those areas. And I feel like getting that report from Eric and asking, what can we do in those areas of value right now is going to be the best way to move forward.
We are coming up to about 5 to 7. Our meetings are only, I don't want to blow the whistle, so we're done at 7, but I want to continue to
No, there's
7:30.
really- there's really no time limit. It's just kind of a guideline, I would say. We don't have to, there's no hard stop at 7, but it's more of a respecting.
So, yeah.
Respect people's
If
time.
we're doing things, we discuss the rankings, we agree that for the next meeting, when we need a State of the Union. The executive
And-
summary, and it can be done beforehand.
Yeah, absolutely. I was texting Eric and me and him are going to discuss tomorrow and see, where we can kind of get things moved forward, just because it is almost July of 2024, waiting to act upon things at each meeting can kind of delay things. So if we can get something ahead of the game, that would be, extremely beneficial, so.
But doing something ahead of the game, then what would be the focus on for our next meeting? To do the subcommittees at that point?
It seems like, it seems like.
Okay.
One thing that occurs to me is we really haven't discussed just how this board's gonna function. We have 3 separate boards coming together here, and each of those boards have their own agendas and some of their own trajectories and things that they were doing. And for instance, historic preservation has not been represented here yet at all. We're not doing any things that we had on our plate aren't being taken care of. And we really need to have at least maybe an historic preservation subcommittee right away. Because one of the things that we've been doing is educational events, but we're not planning any of that right now. We're not working on some of the things that we had listed as significant things that we were working on. The comprehensive plan is a good starting point, and that's important. But there are other things that these boards, the ways they function, the things they contributed to the community. Historic preservation, as I was afraid of when we started this whole process, historic preservation is going to get lost in the shuffle. Unless and I don't see us being able to effectively there's so much here that we can't effectively deal with as an entire board in an hour. And nothing, we're gonna keep spinning our wheels, nothing's gonna happen. I think the most important thing is to try to I think the only way this is gonna function is have these subcommittees and have them sort of work things and bring things to this board rather than keep trying to do everything as a whole group all the time. I don't have any expertise in a lot of this stuff you guys are talking about. I've never been involved with economic development. It's all interesting, but historic preservation is my wheelhouse, and I need to get moving on that. We would like to try to do something on the first Friday, have an event with the Historical Society in the first Friday in August before the summer's gone here. But we really haven't had a chance to do anything about that yet. So I think our priority really is trying to work also to create our structure, how this is gonna happen, how we're gonna be able to effectively get things done. I don't think doing it just as an entire board all the time for an hour is gonna get us very far. So I think the priority is get those subcommittees up and running, so that they can be getting some work done and bringing it to the board to vote on to approve or not approve and so forth.
So, Mr. Chairman, would it make sense, and we really have a triangle, we have three different main areas, and rather than make the initial structure around particular ad hoc things, do it more in those three large topics: historic preservation, business development, and economic, ecological, whatever you want to call it, the third one, sustainability. Is it, and you basically, I mean, we have a chair and a vice chair now, but do we then create like those subcommittees that way that would guide the boards in terms of like, okay, let's emphasize when we're working in sustainability, here's something we can do.
I mean, it depends how we want to do it. Are we gonna do subcommittees on the 5 or 6 things we talked about, even though and I'm not saying we should follow this because there's great reasons why not to. Do we just say, okay, we're not doing number 1, we're not doing number 3, but we need to, do we do the subcommittees based on the items on our list? Or we do the subcommittees based on our, do subcommittees based on the 3, the 3 legs of the tripod?
It's complicated. It was a real Frankenstein, but and that's kind of why I had my small rant about the built environment, because that is an area where I see really is the culmination of those 3 things. Is the built environment is economic development, sustainability and preservation. But it's just it's kind of like, well, where within that larger topic of the built environment would we play a role? Like what is getting built, what is getting preserved, what and how do we affect that? Not to muddy the waters more, but I did.
It's a little frustrating because I feel like each of us has our area of expertise and or previous boards we served on, but also like I was on a separate preservation board, but I want to be able to give input about sustainability and stuff. So I don't necessarily want to be boxed in. I feel like it's sort of a Venn diagram of sorts where like, I want to be able to give my expertise in my area, but I don't want to be just restricted to that. Obviously, all of us want to be informed, but I'm sure there's obviously so many cross connection points between the items. Yeah, I just feel frustrated.
Well, I don't want to say necessarily need a step backwards on this, but if we say, okay, we're getting the State of the Union, then the next thing coming over is really saying, all right, we can either do, we can either do subcommittees based on the items we've listed, or we do subcommittees based on the three focuses, or do we want to say, and it looks like out of the top group, there's nothing historic preservation on the top number. Right, yeah, so that's.
Well, other than being sort of oversight, but we don't want to be the historic preservation police and say, well, we don't want you to destroy that. Or that you need to, it's valuable to have input in economic development and biological sustainability to still maintain the historical character of our environment too. But there are agenda items from the Historic Preservation Board now that just are totally getting ignored. I mean, we did think we were a busy board. We did a lot of activities. And we're not doing any of that anymore.
Sorry to interrupt. So we need some ongoing activity that's related to historic preservation. So it's not about the 18 priority items, but some ongoing operational activity, right?
Well, okay, I didn't bring, we sent the commission a list of the things that were ongoing, but the education is one of the big ones, because we find a lot of people don't really know or understand the historic character, the unique historic character of this community. We have the largest National Register Historic District in the state of Pennsylvania, here in Mount Lebanon. And, you know, in a recent Historical Society newsletter, I saw them sort of misspeaking about that even there. People don't really know enough about why we have a historic district and what is the nature of our history in that sense. So, I mean, there's a lot where we're
Yes.
trying to educate folks, and that we've been doing a number of programs.
Yes, so definitely agree. So I think a subcommittee, to me personally, makes sense because there's ongoing work that needs to be done.
Right. I mean, we've just got started, barely started really trying to develop an historic preservation policy for the municipality as a way to help guide things going on in the future, but that's a heavy lift and something that we've got to do beyond this group, but and also just monitoring. We do now finally have a brick street policy, which is great, but we still need to provide some oversight in terms of how well that's functioning to make sure we don't have a group of outraged citizens coming to our meeting like I did one of my very first historic preservation board meetings.
Well, is it possible, once we get the executive summary and we align on what the priorities are, that the subcommittee may not be so defined by sustainability or development or ecology? I'm completely making this up as an example. If it's South Garage, which I heard everyone loud and clear, it probably won't be South Garage, but maybe there's an element to that particular subcommittee that checks the preservation box and all of the others that are the blanket focuses of these 18 points. You know, does that make sense? So that you've got,
I agree to a point, but what I'm hearing, historic preservation is like it has been an ongoing program. They have programs that were under the Historic Preservation Board, and now they don't exist. Or I shouldn't say, I mean, they've really been taken out.
right.
And so I don't know where.
Well, and I don't want to diminish what the work that has been done and we want to continue, but I don't think that's not one of the overarching, is it? It's a part of.
It's a part of, but I'm trying to get through my mind that if we were like full-time Pittsburgh City Council people say, okay, we have one set of committees for these, you know, these big activities, and then we have another set of subcommittees for, you know, sustainability, economic development, historic preservation. Time-wise, I don't know how, you know, how we need to integrate that, because I think then that takes something, there's sustainability to pretty much everything. There's economic development for pretty much everything. For historic preservation, sometimes it fits in and sometimes it isn't, and I see your point. You don't want to get lost in this job.
Well, right. I mean, we participated in the comprehensive plan, and we were making a lot of input in terms of some of the discussions about the garage, for example, and the importance of maintaining a linkage and integration with the historic character of the downtown as part of the design plans. And I was very happy with some of the ideas that were coming out of that because of our discussion. So I mean, I saw historic preservation doing something valuable there. But my point is, yeah, there are things related to historic preservation that are just sort of falling by the way now. And, you know, when we were first talking about creating this new board structure, that was one of my concerns. And I kept being told, well, you'll have an historic preservation subcommittee, you know?
I feel like perhaps we could, when we email Eric and, or we would ask about having that executive report type thing, we can ask for him to take a look at the list that we sent over again and ask, you know, where can these items fit in, like Brick Street sort of fits with, you know, some of other things in the comp plan and things like that. And we can see, you know, what fits in and what doesn't. So some of them will be addressed there. And then in terms of like our education events and stuff, I know Historical Society does their education events as well. So we could perhaps, because we said maybe having, you know, myself go to those meetings as a little liaison with them, you know, coordinating with them to just have discussion at their events about when they're, you know, out in public about how, oh, we're still a historic district. And I know that doesn't address all the historic preservation stuff, but I feel like our input, whether it be about solar panels on houses or brick streets, within the existing priorities and Eric's alignment of our old priorities with the new ones should address, I feel like majority of our historic preservation
Or-
stuff as much as we can.
Or the way to do it is we do that, and this is something we would like Eric's thoughts are, and anybody else on there is that do we do like, take the all through we have, but make historic preservation a subcommittee?
Yeah.
Just because I feel like we've taken a vibrant committee.
Yeah.
And board, and now it's,
Mhm.
so maybe that's the key. And if, Greg, if you want to convey that to Eric, saying, look, we're thinking about the committees on the top 3 items that we can actually work on. And, give us a state of the union like, but also along with that, there may be a 4th subcommittee that's just, that's historic preservation. And to the extent it weaves into the other ones, that's fine, but again, it's like it's like saying we're closing a great restaurant that serves this. Well, we'll add these menu items here.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, we still close the restaurant, so I think that may be a good way that, just because we're obviously trying to find a solution. Yes, Anna?
So apologies, I actually have to leave at 7. I know we're already over that. So Phil, you know that I'm as strong a proponent for historic preservation, but the unfortunate challenge is that this model of the way that they've changed the committees has cut out some of the key things. And so I would feel uncomfortable with us formulating a committee if the municipality was telling us indirectly that this was something that was not going to be a priority for them. So I think that we just have to vet it with Eric and with the rest of the commissioners. If we have to bring it up in a different forum so that we have the support. But I would hate for us to create a subcommittee that had ideas. Now, I know that you're talking about tracking things. And I remember Ian specifically talking about how there were things that needed to be tracked, like the certifications for cell phone towers and all that kind of stuff that the Historic Preservation Board does, including the implementation of the brick streets policy, but it didn't land anywhere in the planning process. And so I think we have to advocate for ourselves before we put a committee together, because I would hate to meet with the committee and then have nothing come of it.
Well, I mean, but that's the whole purpose of when we're presenting that to Eric, is to say, look, this is an idea. Will this work? I mean, he's not gonna foster a committee and say, that's great, but you're gonna
Well,
get.
it needs a place. It's
Sure.
just where we put it and how we get the place in a way that empowers folks like Phil and others who are interested in historic preservation to actually get the support that they need from the staff and from the commissioners. So I'm so sorry that I have to drop off. And I look forward to seeing you guys again in person. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I did vet this, with the commission, and I had a lot of discussions with them when they were planning the new board structure. And I was told specifically, no, don't worry, historic preservation will go away. You were part
I
of
was at the meeting too.
some of those meetings.
Yeah, Commissioner Flynn assured our whole board that all the boards would continue to be utilized and represented within their role in the new board. So I don't necessarily think it was because these boards have fallen by the wayside, they don't have a purpose anymore. It's more their purpose is being redefined slightly.
Yes, and Commissioner Flynn specifically said, well, there will be an historic preservation subcommittee. That's what he told me specifically. And so that's why I've been waiting, to see how this all is gonna work out, and without, how we can do it without historic preservation being totally lost and not having any sort of voice in the municipality at all anymore. And so,
Your point has been well taken. We will, and given that background, we can do it. Is there anything else before we get, is there anything on the staff liaison report?
I think I pretty much covered just what I was gonna mention about just working through some electric vehicle charging stuff, some fleet electrification, solar that we might be doing here. But I could pretty much cover most of that more in depth in that executive briefing or whatever you want to call it, State of the Union. So, but nothing else as of right now. I think Commissioner.
Anybody, anything else for the good of the order? If not, I think we have a game plan of what we want to do the next meeting. And If no one else has any comments, is there anybody in the public who's still listening? If not, someone make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All those say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Communications.